Yae Miko is one of those characters where a lot of people were excited and impatient for her release, but I just wasn't that interested. While I could see the reasons she appealed to people, many of those reasons were the very things which made me feel like she wasn't for me. Hoyo somehow seems to know when you don't particularly care for a 5-star, and if you risk any pulls on their banner, you end up getting them anyway. And so, of course, the moment I took that risk, I ended up with a 50-50 win at a fairly early pity. So then the obvious question is Yae worth it, even if you're not a huge fan? Yae first appeared in the story in version 2.0, which was just a few weeks before I tried the game. Since she doesn't show up in the story until you reach Inazuma, it would be a few weeks before I met her, but even early on I saw a lot of people saying they couldn't wait for her to be playable. This made me curious, and I was interested to meet her. She shows up fairly soon after the traveler sails to Inazuma, and she has quite a striking appearance and personality, a bright pink kitsune shrine priestess with a spiky and sly persona. While I think she has a beautiful design and a well-realized character, I wasn't a fan at first. The sly way of being and talking, and how she seemed to manipulate others to do her bidding, as well as make certain in-game characters slightly uncomfortable, was rather off-putting to me. By the time her debut banner came in version 2.5, I had a plethora of Electro characters already built, so I wasn't convinced I'd had much need for her. Plus, I had been waiting for Raiden and Kokomi to rerun for 6 whole months, and I knew that it would likely take every primo I owned and then some to bring them home. Her gameplay in the character trial also felt a little awkward. That's often the case with characters who have an unfamiliar playstyle and usually fades away once you've used them a bit, but it all added up to make it an easy decision for me to skip, and save my Primogems with no regrets. While playing through the rest of the Inazuma quests, I got a little more used to her personality quirks and particularly enjoyed her relationship with Raiden. Raiden had long been a favorite of mine, but she definitely needs her irreverent friend to poke at her when she's taking things too seriously, and Yae felt much more likable in that context. Yae's story quest in particular made me warm up to her a lot more than previously, since it showed more of her vulnerable side. It takes place after the end of the main Inazuma arc, with a story which pokes fun at Genshin players themselves and all the elaborate wishing rituals people come up with. The right tone underlying the whole quest somehow made Yae's personality feel much more natural, and her loneliness after the banquet of parting made her feel much more relatable. Eventually, Yae had her first rerun banner in version 3.2. While my initial dislike towards her had faded, I still felt that I didn't really need her, and would have felt no regret skipping entirely. However, I really wanted Layla, the newly released 4-star character, and decided to wish on Yae's side of the banner since I also wouldn't have been actively unhappy to get her. And as I mentioned at the start, Hoyo knows when you're not that interested, so of course I got not 1 but 2 copies of Yae at fairly early pity before Layla finally came home. I threw some spare wishes at her weapon banner too and was lucky enough to get her signature weapon. Since I wasn't super excited for her, I had little need for a new Electro character and was running low on leveling materials, I decided it would make sense to wait a while before actually leveling Yae. But then my friend who had also just got her leveled her up straight away, the curse of the FOMO struck, I threw together some cast-off artifacts and farmed her boss, and in short order I had a fully built Yae Miko at my disposal. So now that I had time to properly get used to her, did I even like her playstyle, and was she worth it in the end? In short, absolutely. It turns out that I actually loved her gameplay. Yae Miko is just simply easy to play. I've always been a fan of off-field damage dealers and element suppliers, since they give teams so much flexibility, and Yae does a brilliant job at that. Her skill can be cast 3 times, and each cast leaves a turret on the field. Pink lightning periodically flashes from these turrets, striking at nearby enemies, applying electro and causing a lot of damage. This is the part of her kit which had felt awkward when I tried her the first time around. Each kill cast makes her zoom around the field, and in the trial something had felt very off-putting about it, at least when using a controller. This time around, her skill felt much smoother than I had remembered, and slotting her into my teams was a piece of cake. The biggest complaint I have about Yae is actually just the cosmetic one. She should have had a special sprint animation. There's something about her running animation which feels a little off. Her dress in particular looks odd, but even ignoring that, it feels like a missed opportunity. She could have transformed into a pink lightning fox and darted forwards before becoming visible again, similar to her skill animations but tweaked to be a little closer to the ground. Special sprint animations sometimes feel a little clunky and take some getting used to, but Yae's skill already takes a little getting used to, so I feel like it would have been a much smaller problem in her case. Most of the time I use her almost exclusively for her skill, since it's such an effective part of so many teams. I particularly like using her with Alhaitham, Fischl and another Dendro in a powerful and fun Catalyze team with a very smooth rotation, and in co-op she's my second choice for electro characters after Raiden. Her only downside is that she's very squishy and prone to being knocked around, though that's easy enough to solve by using her with a shielder. Baizu in particular has been great for that. The fact that she can be used for her skill alone makes her very useful in the overworld, and one of my go-to teams for a while was a Hyperfridge team with Layla, Yae, Kokomi and Nahida. It's not the strongest team by any means with my current builds, but it's extremely comfortable. Her burst is also extremely powerful, calling down a huge strike of her signature Pink Lightning. If any of her skill turrets are on the field when you cast her burst, they explode to cause extra AoE damage and their cooldowns are instantly reset. Since her burst has a very high energy cost and an extremely long cooldown, it's often easier to do this every other rotation or as a final nuke rather than every time, but it's worth working in when possible. As a Catalyst user with a strong DPS style kit, Yae can also work well as a main driver of the team. Her attacks feel leisurely and slow, triggering cascades of beautiful Pink Lightning. I've particularly enjoyed her in Taser team since I've stuck to her initial build, but I might modify her build for a Hyper Bloom at some point as well. I have actually never changed Yae's build after throwing it together just after I got her, so she's still technically using a bunch of random cast-off artifacts, which just happened to be lying around. They were good artifacts, but nobody else had needed them at the time, and as a result, it's been a strong enough build that I've never felt the need to upgrade it. The main stats I gave her were attack for the Sands, electro damage bonus for the Goblet, and crit damage for the Circlet. She has 2P's Emblem for increased energy recharge and 2P's Wanderers for a little EM boost. She might benefit more as a main driver from having a 4P's Thundering Fury set, or she could buff the team by making use of 4P's Tenacity, but with 2 relevant 2P sets she's more than strong enough already. She's surprisingly easy to build crit for since her Ascension stat is crit rate. Normally, if a character has a crit damage weapon, you'd expect them to need a crit rate circlet to maintain a balanced ratio, but in her case she ended up with a very strong 58 to 213 ratio. Without her signature weapon, she would have a host of different options such as Witsith, Lost Prayer or even Solar Pearl, all of which would result in a largely similar build, or many of the non-crit weapons would be just as viable. I didn't spend any time optimizing her substats, but they happened to give her a good spread of crit, attack and energy recharge, plus enough EM to feel comfortable in a more traditional elemental DPS role. As I mentioned earlier, I'd also like to try her out in Hyper Bloom team, but that would require some significant changes here. For that role, she would want an EM-focused build, which would mean changing the artifacts entirely, but I don't really like doing that until we have some way to store artifact loadouts, since I wouldn't want to pick apart such a strong build without an easy way to put it back together again. If you're considering pulling for Yae, rest assured that if you do decide to go for her, she's well worth it. After all, she won me over. She adds a lot to any account, even one with a lot of electro characters, fits into a wide variety of teams, and can be comparatively easy to build. And besides, she has pink hair and makes Pink Lightning. What more could anyone want? Until next time!